Good afternoon, fellow ruminators, or not ruminators, but welcome back to the Andrew Tucker TV channel. And for those of you who do not know, I also have a main channel called Rumination with Andrew. You can go over there and you can also subscribe to my channel for deep, incisive, biting political commentaries. Now, this morning we are going to look at who won the debate. The financial debate was held last night, and we are here to give and to render some form of political commentary. Now, it was an interesting lineup of bigwigs in both political parties. We had Fable Williams on the JLP side, and she is the current finance minister. We also had Dr. Christopher Tufton, who is the Minister of Health and Wellness, and we have Dr. Dana Morris Dixon, and she is the current Minister of Education. On the PNP side, we have had Julian Robinson, and Julian Robinson is the Shadow Minister of Finance. And we have Keisha Anderson. First time I was hearing of her. And on her Instagram page, you have Keisha Anderson has nearly 30 years of experience in the financial sector, beginning at JMMB, where she helped lead branch development and the company's transition into a financial service group. She now serves as a director across JMMB entities in Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados, while also leading a junior market-listed diagnostic imaging company as CEO and executive director. So we have a lot of people here. Well, she is in the private sector, if you will, and she was one of the debaters on the PNP side last night. Quite an interesting. And in addition to Keisha Anderson, you also have Peter Bunting, and Peter Bunting is currently the leader of opposition business in the Senate, and he is Shadow Minister of National Security too, I believe. And very interesting roundup of participants. Now, the fact of the matter is that it was a very interesting debate in terms of where they are going to move the economy to. Now, I thought that it was interesting that you had these people behind the interviewers, which one from TVJ and the other gentleman, Edward, I think he was. I'm not sure who he is. But directly seated behind these interviewers were these white faces, or the faces. I don't know who these people are. Are they the public sector, or are they there as faces, representatives of the private sector or the global community to keep these people on the check? The leaders to be, or the leaders who are already in leadership position, the incumbent. Not sure who they were, but I found it interesting that these three what looked like white faces, I don't know who they represented and what institution they were there to represent at the debate last night. But it kicked off on really a great punch. And as you know, Julian Robinson, who I thought did a magnificent job in terms of his delivery, in terms of his master of language, his use of language, his comfort with whatever he was projecting. Now, let me just say to you that this is a debate. Debates don't mean that people are telling you the truth, and that is what you have to understand. Either party, whether it be they, the JLP, or the PNP, they are giving you their narrative, and who is more convincing in punching and who is able to get across to convey their points are the ones who will win. It doesn't mean, therefore, that they told you the truth and that they are going to be effective in terms of good governance and the way they lead the country. So having said that, Julian Robinson did a magnificent job in terms of his use, his grasp of his content, his narrative, and his ability, the capacity that he had to communicate clearly and effectively what he thought he was going to do. Now, there were a lot of, what should I say now, uh, you, you know, convoluted statements in terms of his pronouncement on increasing the tax threshold, the income tax threshold to 3.5. At one point, he's saying that that is going to save people lots of money and it's going to help the poor class of people. At the end of, on the other hand, he was saying that, that the fact that the JLP had done that because that was their baby. That's the JLP's baby in terms of increasing the tax threshold and, having not to pay tax on a certain amount of money that you earn. Now, the fact is that he's accusing Fable Williams and the JLP party that their implementation of that 1.5 and 1.7 and 1.8 and eventually they will go up to 1 to 2.1 or 2.0 increases the debt, increases the tax threshold that he's saying that that it is actually increasing. Jamaicans have to pay more taxes as a result of that. And he was not clear in what he was saying. Where do we have to pay more tax and how has it grown to 30, did he say 30,000 additional taxes that have been imposed upon the people? He did not say. What we need to understand is that when they're playing these games, oftentimes, yes, while they are taking and they're pretending that you're saving on X, they are increasing on Y. So you have to make sure that you're following the logic of what they're saying. And, they're taking from Peter to give to Paul, but at the same time, they are increasing some amount of your debt, increasing the amount of money that you spend because you might have more money in your pocket, yes, but when you go to the supermarket, are you able to buy, the same things that you bought maybe yesterday? That is the questions that you have to ask. Now, in terms of the JLP, I thought that Dr. Christopher Tofton, he was the one who shone on that side. In terms of his delivery, in terms of his mastery of the narrative, the JLP narrative, in terms of the unemployment rate, and he talked about the economic growth or the lack thereof, but of course he's talking about economic growth because it is his party. He looked at the Finsac and he punched the PNP with that 40,000 people lost their businesses and 40,000, and he kept on, repeating and dishing out lots of, facts as regarding the Finsac debacle. What he did not mention is that both parties are complicit in what took place, even though the reigning government was then the People's National Party. And also what Dr. Tofton did not say is that his government, under the leadership of Dr. Andrew Holness, had the opportunity to have published an unedited version of the Finsac report that the country paid millions of dollars to have published, and he did not. And he did not. And we saw the same thing with the Mannert Commission when Bruce Golding, the whole saga with the whole, extradition of Christopher Dudos Coke. Okay, and all of these things affected our economy. We are not taking into consideration also that took place, what happened during the extradition process under the Golding-led administration, that was a big also halt on our economy in more than one ways. One, productivity fell because of the state of emergency that was involved during that time. Also, the fact that the prime minister had to demit office, okay, all of that was a lot of tension. Then tensions with the IMF, and we had to wait until 2012, I think it was, before we inked, or 2013, I believe it was, before we inked an agreement with the IMF. Okay, so all of that affected us in terms of financial investor confidence. All of that was something that hit Jamaica hard. And we are still trying to dig ourselves out of that rubble, out of that garbage, what took place in 2010. Not to also mention the matter of not the Finsac, but the Carlos Hill's Cash Plus, and also Audit. All of these things happened under the JLP government, which was also another Finsac experience, and all of these things have not come to light in terms of what really happened. We have not yet learned the truth, even though we have had to suffer the economic consequences of all the poor actions and the poor policies that might have been implemented under both administrations. So I would think that, yes, if Dr. Tofton really wanted to have justice dispensed to Jamaicans, particularly the people who have lost their businesses, the 40,000 people that he made reference, that he referred to, it means therefore that he should he should have encouraged his government under the Dr. Andrew Holness-led administration to publish the unedited version that, of course, the guy that went to the IMF, what's his name, Nigel Clark, he was the one who said that in Jamaica's interest, it perhaps is not best to have published an unedited version. So what they did, they, published redacted versions of the same, which is not going to help Jamaicans, because what they normally do when they publish these redacted versions is that they hide the meat of the matter. They hide a lot of the truth. So we don't know what is what, who is who, and how Fininsac might have the profundity and the fact that both political parties seemed to have been involved. And the same thing with the All-In and also with the Cash Plus. Both political parties, even though the JLP were in power, that was in power at the time, but the fact of the matter is that both political parties were involved, and they have not said so. They've decided to hide that, to conceal that data. In terms of, the questions that were asked, interesting questions in terms of the fact that Jamaicans receive remittances and also that they send a lot of things to the homes through customs. And what are they going to do to make customs more efficient? And the PNP's response was horrible because she focused more on remittances and totally ignored the whole aspect of, the fact that it's too costly to send barrels, and the whole process of clearing these barrels the process is highly inefficient. And I did it once, and I would never even want my enemy, not even my enemy, to go through the experience that I went through clearing barrels through customs in Jamaica. It is a horrific experience that nobody should ever go through. And you waste your day, and you have to grease palms if you are going to get anything done. If you want to move forward and quickly, you've got to grease palm. Okay, and that is what happens in Jamaica. So the process needs to be much more efficient. Now, Dr. Morris Dixon, she attempted to answer the question, which she sort of rendered a little bit more, clearer response than what Keisha Anderson had leveled, had projected. Now, Dr. Dana Morrison Dixon also did not, tell us how they're going to do that. She talked about the the Customs Act that should have been passed through the Senate, she was suggesting, and they have, it was allowed to pass through the House. But I'm not sure how they're going to make the process more efficient. What is included in that Customs Act bill? What are the policies that are included in that Customs Act bill to make the process more efficient and less tedious and less rigorous, and the fact that it is, and also time efficient, because the whole matter is that you stay there the entire day at customs trying to clear a few things, and it's also very costly to do so. And the processes that you have to go through, you go to this and then you go to that, and it's just unending. Okay, I think that it can be most of these processes can be eliminated. The problem is that if they eliminate these things, one, people are going to lose jobs, and they don't want that to happen, because that could also result in the incumbent government being defeated at the polls. Another thing is that, that is how man eat a food. And the eat a food culture that is in Jamaica is very embedded in the culture. I don't know how they are going to uproot it. And it begins from the top. It starts from the financial elites, right down to our politicians, right down to the citizens of Jamaica. So this hustling, eat a food culture would have to be totally eradicated if we are going to make the process efficient. And I don't think that that is going to happen, because that is how people eat a food, and keep the government machine working. Now, in terms of jobs, as Dr. Morris Dixon and Dr. Tufton, wanted to suggest, they were telling us that the JLP, that the poverty rate has gone down tremendously. Yet still, Dr. Morrison Dixon, she herself, and that's why they kept on, digging a hole for themselves. The more they open their mouth, is the more holes that they dug for themselves on both sides of the political aisle. So when you hear that Dr. Dana Morrison Dixon, suggesting that, the country is prosperous, and also Christopher Tofton, that is Jamaica is going through one of the most prosperous times that we have ever seen. Yet still, she herself said that when she goes to rural schools, when the whole matter of the rural buses came up, and and giving the students lunch and all of that stuff, she said that when she goes to school, when she visits these schools in the rural areas, particularly on a Friday, that half of the class, all right, of the students do not show up when she visits these various classes. Why? Because the parents are suggesting that they don't have any money. They don't have the lunch money, and they don't have any money to bus their kids to school. And that is why, of course, they're trying to, have this bus up and running, and also to provide some sort of nutrition in the schools, which is good. But what it suggests is that the economy is not as prosperous as we think it is. Because if the economy and all these jobs that were created, and perhaps I'm not going to knock Dr. Dana and Dixon, and also Dr. Christopher Tofton, for suggesting that there are no jobs created. I'm sure there were probably the 580,000 jobs that they were saying. But what quality jobs? Were they quality jobs that were paying the workers well? Or are they just menial jobs that don't have even any form of job security, and do not pay well, do not pay high wages or salaries? And I think that it is the latter. I think that's the latter. And that is why it's being translated into the whole matter of the fact that parents can't send their children to school because they either have no lunch money, or they do not have proper nutrition. They can't buy lunch at school. Okay, so that is what we have to suggest. This is not a prospering economy. And when they talked about the whole matter of the people in abroad, the diaspora, were suggesting that the whole matter of customs need to be dealt with, because of the desperation in Jamaica, families have to send their family members, food and clothing, and because they're not surviving. They're not thriving as Dr. Morrison Dixon is suggesting that they are thriving. They are not thriving at all. Okay, many of our Jamaican citizens are not thriving, and that is why remittances are on the high, because without that, the whole country would suffer. And, well, the majority of citizens would suffer. Another thing is the fact that customs, they're clamoring, the diaspora, members of the diaspora are clamoring that they deal with the whole inefficiency at customs, and also the high cost of clearing things, merchandise sent to Jamaica. Okay, so this economy that they are suggesting is thriving. It's not based on what the realities are. And they themselves are declaring, including the senator, the Minister of Education, she was suggesting that people are having problems, even paying bus fare for their kids, and also to feed their kids. And that's why they're trying to come up with a rural bus system, which is good. But don't tell us now, don't hide it, that we do need to build our economy, because they're telling us about the lowering of debt, but at what cost? At what cost? And now, when I turn now the leaf over to Fable Williams was horrible. And people were just defending her. She looks nice. She might not be able to speak, but she's a bright woman. Now, one of the virtues, I think, or one of the characteristics, and I've taught at the university level, so you don't tell me anything about university education. But the fact of the matter is that if you're not able to communicate your ideas clearly and succinctly, I don't care how bright you are or what institution that you went to, where you went to Harvard or you went to Oxford, it doesn't matter to me. Because going to these institutions don't mean that you're necessarily bright. It means, therefore, that you're able to pass exams and you did what you were supposed to do and you follow instructions. And that is how you were able to move on anyway. But if you cannot communicate complex ideas, breaking these ideas down so that the public can understand, then she's not right. And she was not able to express clearly her ideas. She was just expressing herself in a convoluted manner. And, and at many times she appeared as if, she was confused herself. She was talking and she was confused with the information that she was trying to relay to the Jamaican people. Okay. The only thing that soundbite that she said was when she mentioned that, Julian Robinson's increase in the in the income tax threshold was the greatest political scam in the history of Jamaica. That was the only thing that resonated with me. Nothing else that she said was of any major importance. It would have been better if Fable Williams had not been there, because on that basis, because of her pronouncements and the fact that she did not master an understanding of what she is doing as she stands at the helm of the Ministry of Finance, it gave the JLP a losing match against the PNP. If it were another strong candidate, I think that we could say there would be a tie, or perhaps the PNP would still edge out. But I would say that the PNP emerged as a clear winner, in the sense that Fable Williams was not able to articulate. She was just more of a liability to the team than an asset, which should not be the case. It should be vice versa, because she is actually the Minister of Finance. It means, therefore, that it would have been better if, I would think, if Dr. Christopher Tufton, because, he also has his PhD. According to the moderator, he has a PhD in business administration. So he could be the Minister of Finance. Why didn't they give him that position? Because he would have been able to express his ideas, at least what they have on paper, much more efficiently, much more effectively, much more succinctly. Okay, that's my opinion. So I think that when you look at the debaters from the PNP side, you might not like Peter Bunting, and we find him to be cold, to be indifferent, to be arrogant, to be not a people person. He's just not. Just like I've said also that Marlene Malahou Fort is not a people person. And I think that the same thing for Peter Bunting. They're just not people person. They think about themselves. They're just in politics to get whatever they get from politics. But, whatever I want to say about Peter Bunting, he did do a good job last night, right? He did do a good job last night in terms of giving his knocks, and he and Dr. Christopher Tufton were at it, and they really, really were relenting, and they really were, they were eloquent for whatever it was. Now, I'm not suggesting that I am speaking on the side of truth, because our politicians do not speak on the side of truth. And that is what you have to understand, whether they are PNP or they're JLP. They are tricksters, and that's why we call it politricks, to trick you into believing what you ought not to believe. But in terms of coming back with salvo and coming back with a political punch, I think that both of them were quite effective, especially when they talked about Fininsac and the fact that Dr. what's his name, Peter Bunting, was able to talk about the matter that the taxes that Jamaicans, or Jamaica is one of the highest taxed countries in the Caribbean region. And that as a result of that, our middle class has been hollowed out, because we are more depending on, reducing the debt. Okay, we have placed more emphasis since the IMF agreement on debt reduction than on reducing poverty, rather than on building the economy by growing it. Okay, so he's suggesting that yes, while the macroeconomics, that's what Peter Bunting was saying, would be good and is good, but we ought to also understand that we ought to translate that macroeconomic development into the lives and to the lived experience of our people. A point that was also reinforced by Julian Robinson, who was the star of the PNP side. Okay, now in terms of the matter of debt, not doctor, but yeah, Fable Williams. Fable Williams was very much also on this fact. She made this, very strident fact that, we have to, once we lower debt, then everything will take care of itself. And I'm like, come on. We have to have policies of growth that balances out, or balances our debt reduction strategies. We've got to have effective policies of growth. We have to invest in our people. And I am not hearing anything from either side what they're going to do. I think, even even Julian Robinson, when he talked about the fact that he's going to increase the income tax threshold, when they asked how it's going to be done, did you hear what he said? He said he's going to just grow the economy. And as if the economy is just easy, you just grow the economy, something easy to do. Well, they did say they're going to invest in agriculture, but even that too, do you know that these politicians have signed us into international agreements in which the whole matter of agriculture, and if you want to listen to an organic farmer, go on to Jamaica with Irie, and she did an interview with a farmer, a Jamaican organic farmer who resides in Stone Hill. And he was suggesting that the government in Jamaica doesn't allow farmers to import into Jamaica organic seeds. They all have to import GMO seeds. And do you know who is reaping the profit from those GMO seeds? Bill Gates. Bill Gates, not Jamaica. Okay? And not only that, that many of these GMO seeds and the GMO foods that we are consuming are sickening us, which is going to cost Jamaica lots of money for healthcare, to take care of these, to treat the symptoms. And they're not healing these diseases, by the way. They're only treating the symptoms of these diseases. While the man is saying, let food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. Okay, so when they're telling us that they're going to invest the sums of money into, that's the PNP, into agriculture, they're not serious about that. They're just wanting your votes because they have already signed on to multinational agreements with multinational organizations that they cannot do that. You cannot compete. You are not going to be able to compete with Bill Gates GMO foods, right? So the farming that we are accustomed to is being taken over by what we call an agribusiness, agri-farming. Okay, and that is what Andrew Holness is promoting. Okay, so soon we're going to have lots of things grown in a lab to be consumed, which is going to make us sick. Okay, so that is some of the things that we need to understand, and they were not explicating these things in a more in the most effective manner. Okay, they weren't, because their thing is to win and to fool you, and then you run and you vote for them, and you say vote for Labour, vote for the PNP, when both of them are just using you as a means of getting into power so that they can have access to state capital and wealth and resources that they can use it to enrich themselves and the financial elites. And as I saw these three people behind the interviewers just staring, just peering into the interviewer's eyes, I said, look at that. Because I think they perhaps were from the private sector or from the international community. Those people who were just looking there were just obvious. And who are these people? My question is, who are these people and why were they? I shouldn't say ask why were they there, because they perhaps are a part of the private sector and it's their right to be there. But just I was just curious. I'm curious. I'm curious. And when I look into the audience and I saw them, and the camera picked them up many times, we're focusing on them quite a number of times, I had to ask myself that important question. Okay. Now, in terms of debate style, I think that Marissa Dixon was very good. She was, she's a very good communicator. She's an effective communicator, and she expresses herself very well. Okay. But as we're suggesting here, she herself, did not address the whole concept of the fact that brain drain, the whole matter of brain drain came up. And she was just saying she was at university, and she graduated from university in 2001, and people have always been leaving Jamaica. But 80% of our university graduates leave Jamaica per year. Now, if Jamaica were a thriving country, why would the best minds, 80% of our graduates, upon graduating university, leave Jamaica? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. And this is a yearly crisis. Not only that, we are ranked, Jamaica is ranked number 2 in the world as regards brain drain, the high rate of brain drain. So, we have not yet computed the effects of this high level of brain drain on our economy, on the lack of economic growth. And when I talk about the lack of economic growth, Dana Dixon also contradicted herself again when she and her fellow colleague, that's Dr. Christopher Tufton, were suggesting that the economy had grown. I think Fable Williams also, I think it was Fable Williams telling us about the economy had grown many quarters, and all of the quarters since the JLP, and of course, one of the interviewers pushed back by saying that the data coming from the World Bank do not cohere with what the finance minister was suggesting about this, all of these quarters of economic growth. Right? So, and the fact is that Dana Dixon was suggesting that, she was giving the roadblocks to economic growth as in, poor infrastructure and all of the things that she was giving. Yeah, and some of these things, yes, do militate against economic growth, but you were there for 9 years. Why didn't you fix the roads? And all of the barricades to economic growth, the poor skills, as she was suggesting, yet still we have 80% of our graduates are leaving. 80% of our university graduates are leaving. It means, therefore, that we're losing, why we don't have good skills and quality skills, and that's why we're not having economic growth, because the majority of our skilled and highly educated leave. And we will never have economic growth if that is what she's suggesting about the fact that our workers are not particularly highly skilled, because they leave. The skilled ones leave. And today I read an article in the Jamaica, I think it was in the Gleaner, which suggested that we have to take education more seriously in terms of the numbers of our teachers who are leaving the classroom to go to abroad because of a better remuneration package. Okay? We have to take education more seriously. And we cannot continue to have our teachers just go every year. Well, we have to allow them because they are free people. But if we give them better wage package, a better wage offer, then they would remain. And if the economy was thriving, as Dr. Morris Dixon and Dr. Christopher Tufton were suggesting, it means, therefore, that they would have remained. They would have remained, but they do not see a viable option remaining in Jamaica. They don't see that. They don't see that. Okay? So on both sides of the political aisle, they were just merely making these grandiose statements. The JLP, they are saying we are in power and see, we're doing these things. We're doing these great things. But when we look at it, when we look beneath the surface, we realize that there are many things that are lacking. And when you look at the constituencies and the neglect in these constituencies, I was talking to somebody yesterday where they're saying Juliet's constituency, because she wants to win, all the roads and bridges have been fixed up. All the roads and bridges. And the question was, as we were talking yesterday, where did she get that money from? Where did Juliet finally get all those sums of money to fix all the roads and bridges before the election is held? These are some of the questions we have to ask. So I think that without doubt and without any bias in my mind, the PNP emerged as the clear winner of the financial debates that were held last night. The team of Julian Robinson, who was a star, wrapped up with great, punches for the JLP. Yes, and Keisha wasn't very hot, she did her thing, but she was able to, in a concise manner. She was not, one of the things I liked about Keisha, she was not just chatting and chatting nonsense. She hit it to the core. She might have answered the question in terms of the remittances where they were talking about customs, but at the end of the day, she, her responses were concise and to the point. Okay. And of course, Peter Bunting, like him or hate him, he did make some very important points yesterday. Now, will he be better in terms of when he goes into power? I don't think so. Because we have seen, we've seen this playbook before. We've seen this playbook before, and they all sound very, wonderful, and they all sound like saviors and redeemers until they get into power. The realities hit, and they do the same thing. Because the economy is not going to grow in the way if we do not attack education, if we do not attack our language deficiency, if we do not attack the fact that we can't just continue to just, reduce debt. And there is no growth policies. Can't be. We're not investing in our people. We're not investing in organic farming. We're not building the infrastructure of our hospitals. We can be building new hospitals, but we also have to build, as Peter Bunting or one of the others suggested, that in some of these hospitals, we don't even have toilet papers, right? There's a lack of toilet papers in some of these hospitals. So they were both being, disingenuous last night in their debates points. But at the end of the day, if I thought I wanted to vote for one of the parties, I think that the PNP would have done a little bit more convincing than the JLP. And I think why, too, is because how can you have a finance minister who is staring at a ministry, very important, probably the most important, I would say, ministry apart from education in government, okay? Because without economics, we are nothing, just like education. So I would say education and finance are perhaps the two most important ministries in the country, okay? And yet still, she doesn't understand. She doesn't have a concept of what she's doing, her policies. She can't articulate her policies clearly and in an intelligent manner. It can't just be that she's a graduate of Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania. That is not going to hold sway. And it's time for us to grow up and move away from these titles and make sure that even if the person is coming from the University of Technology or Western District College, Northern Caribbean University, and they can articulate their statements, and they can articulate their vision where they want to take the country to, then that is a person who is more intelligent. It can't be because you're a graduate of Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania or New York University. I don't care where you're from. What I want you to do is to be able to show me that you have an understanding, a clear understanding of your stuff, of the information that you are relaying to me. And Fable Williams, I don't know if she was ill or she was tired or she was hungry, but she did a terrible job, horrible job. And because of that, she allowed the PNP to have emerged as a clear winner of last night's debate. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you would tell me from your perspective, in your opinion, and let's be respectful here of each other's opinion. Let me know, who do you think won the debate? Because I didn't think there was any winner in the first one, because I thought that one was like a reality TV show. It was not interesting at all. But because this had to do with our economics and where we are going as a country, and these are the people at the helm of, Fable Williams is at the helm, and Julian Robinson, if he should become, if the PNP should win, at the helm of our finances. And can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if Fable Williams was not backed up, if she was not backed up by the other two members, Dr. Dana Morris Dixon and Dr. Christopher Tufton, what would have happened to her? I mean, Julian Robinson would have just shelled her out. He would have completely demolished her, and the JLP would have lost completely. But they lost last night because she was still on the team, and she was more a liability than an asset. What do you think? All the best to you. Thank you for joining. Ciao.